You're not going to be alone out there. All right.
But I should have 18 for the other 3 weeks, so I should be able to even it out.
All right, we're live, guys. So good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, here on a Friday night, Q&As with the great man himself, Damo. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Swizz. I actually asked you if I could come on, so thanks for allowing me to crash your party.
Nah, mate, any time of that. I do it with the Centre Bounce boys now, too. I'm like, oh, what are you doing? They're like, recording. I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to jump on. They're like, yeah, no problem, Swizz. Just do whatever you want. So I appreciate, mate. We're happy to have, you've been kind and had me on your show and that, which I really appreciate. As a big fan of the Jock Reynolds boys for a long time. So that was actually something the wife was really proud of. She's like, oh yeah, Jock Reynolds. I always listen to them. So that's she's like, yeah, you definitely get involved with them. So no, happy to have you on board, mate. We were just talking about the carnage and that. You want to tell our listeners out there what's happened to your team this, mate? I know you didn't want me to bring it up, but we can't not ignore it, mate.
I planned a little way out with my trades to try and make sure I had at least 18. I wanted a bit more than 18 so I could have some scores drop out that I didn't really want to be counted. But I didn't expect Oliver to get injured. I didn't expect Sicily to get suspended. And then we got Seamus Mitchell out with illness, and Sam Simpson got dropped a few weeks ago out of nowhere. Now I've gone from having 20 or 21 to having 16. Luckily for me, though, I should have 18 for the rest of the other bye rounds, so it should even out in the long run, hopefully. But yeah, I've been hit this week.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's just absolutely brutal. I'm on the other train. I've been actually quite lucky outside of Mitchell, which all it means is I've traded him now instead of Will Day, who I wanted to kind of squeeze out of my side. But if Chesser plays, I'm sitting with 21 this week, so in a much different position. It's just now about making sure I don't stuff myself come round 15.
Yeah, round 15's the tricky one, isn't it? But I mean, there's always one tricky buy round every single year, and some people just ignore it. Some people go, okay, well that's the week I'm gonna shit the bed a little bit, but other people plan really well for it, and I guess it depends which way you want to swing. And most of the time, people would prefer to have 18 every single week, but we know that doesn't always pan out, as I'm finding out this week.
Yes, no, and it's so brutal. Like, especially when you think Mitchell's named and you're like, good, there's one safe there, and it's just the illness. Like, are you for real? Like, it's just so frustrating, and I think it's the frustration that everybody's been feeling this year, and just those top teams, like a bit like Chris in a way, has just managed to avoid it week in and that, while everybody else just continues to suffer.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Chesser there. I don't know. I don't think he plays it. I don't think he's the sub, but I've got him on my field just in case I need an extra 10 points.
Yeah, exactly. I've put him on there, and I just think he's my 21st. That I could actually see him being sub because I have done it before. But yeah, that 10, 20 points just comes out, and it's the top 20 anyway. And I'm hopeful Chincotta actually scores decent tonight, but even if he doesn't, I feel like that's just another one that, in a way, I kind of actually want him to score bad because everybody else is going to have him take that 20 or 30 points, and yeah, it just cycles out of my score. So it could be a real brutal weekend. I feel like that's going to be the difference. There's going to be some highly owned player that's going to go really bad, and then there's players, people of 17 and 18, are just going to get absolutely burnt by that person.
And there's going to be the people that jumped on a player like Kieran Briggs, who's going to score 150 or something, and there's only going to be the people who really needed him because they had Darcy or whatever, and decided to go down and then up somewhere else, and will be benefiting from that trade in. And I actually don't mind the Kieran Briggs trade in. I just don't know. I just didn't know how I could manage it, especially considering my team has been decimated with injuries, suspensions. So I've used trades left, right, and centre more than I would hope to have used by now. But yeah, if I completely understand the move, and I love the move to bring in Kieran Briggs, especially to cover Marshall this week, and then Tim English or whoever else you've got further down the line.
Yeah, so I've been one of those people with Brooke Briggs. It's probably one less trade than I've wanted to use. But it's at the same time, yeah, it's only 1 week of cover, but I feel like he could make 150 cash in no time. So that's definitely what I've been thinking there. I'll get to some of these questions at firing. Thank you for people who have joined on and in the chat. So we've got Eddie saying Wardlaw might be the most popular pick now with Mitchell going out. Do you agree with that? And would you get on the Wardlaw train?
Of the North rookies, I think if you're not going for Eddie Ford, that's the North rookie you need to jump on. But aside from Eddie Ford, I don't mind the Wardlaw pick. I think he's going to have some good job security, and it sounds like they're going to just continue to play him. They're going to continue to pump games into him, continue to use him in the midfield setup. So I think if he's someone who you think you'll get long-term job security out of, then he's someone who you could use as cover on the run home. But that 43 that he scored against Collingwood, he's actually going to stay in his cycle a little bit longer while he's making the cash. So he's not going to be able to be someone who makes a quick penny and you're able to jump off him when his buy round rolls around.
Yeah, I think he's more like he's the perfect Ashcroft replacement because that's all he is. Ashcroft's had some poor games in the 50s, and I think, yeah, he's definitely going to have his games where he's 80s, 90s. It's just the case where, as you said, if you're looking for him as a cash-making person, because that 43, that's not going to happen. He's more, I feel like he's a slow burn keeper, perfect in the end, I think maybe as an M9, who's just going to be a guy that's going to play every week in North Melbourne's midfield. You have somebody with a 1 week injury, and you can bring him on, hopefully for a comfortable 70. That's my thinking.
Yeah, if he can average about 70 or 75 on the run home, then I think that's the best you can hope for Wardlaw. I don't think he's someone you bring in to then jump off in a couple of weeks once he's made a bit of cash. I think Eddie Ford, he's the one to bring in if you're looking to do that. He scored 102 and then 83, and if he scores another 83 on the weekend, then he's on track to make like 200k in 3 weeks or something.
Exactly, and that's why I'm sort of more on the Briggs train for that. I think Briggs is the perfect 3 week player, 100 to 150k, and just because of his price anyway, you're trading out a guy who's going to be 350, potentially slightly more. And those people who are looking at, like me, maybe a Darcy Cameron after his buy, it might only be 100k to get him up to it. And then if you've got a McAndrew or a Madden, just put them back into R3, and yeah, you've got a very handy D6 R3 backup. I mean F6.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point.
To Kev, and I'm going to just give Kev a little shout out. Thanks for popping down and to my cricket game last week, mate. And that if you're not doing anything tomorrow, Kev, we're in Cranbourne. Bring your whites, mate. But he was like, I'm upgrading Mitchell or Chincotta to Stewart, but now I'm holding both and trading Davey to Darcy Cameron and thinking about getting Stewart after his bye. What do you think of that?
I wouldn't be trading Chincotta because he's playing tonight. So he's points on your field, and yeah, bringing in Stewart or whoever you're bringing in is improving your overall points on field. But while Chincotta's playing, I don't think you trade him just yet. You might wait until his bye and hope that he holds on in the Carlton team until then. I don't mind trading Davey to was it Darcy Cameron that he was bringing in? Yeah, I don't mind that, but do you have enough players at that Collingwood bye to have 18 that week? So I to be honest, I'd probably hold fire on bringing anyone in this week and see if you can bring them in next week. Especially, you can players that are currently on the bye this week. You can look at a Andy Brayshaw or a Caleb Sarong, a Chad Warner, a Jake Lloyd or something next week, who will give you the same amount of points on field. Just without a bye to worry about.
Exactly. I think a few people, and it's even in our A-team chat, we were talking about before, that everyone's looking at Darcy Cameron thinking, you beauty, he's playing against West Coast this week, so he should smash out a decent score. But he's also playing Melbourne next week against the two big boys. So I think he's the perfect guy to wait until after round 14. We're going to want somebody to trade in at round 15. And I think that's the player, as you said. There's no harm in bringing around 12. Like some people have messaged me going, should I trade Ashcroft now to Sarong or Neil? Well, absolutely, because it's not actually hurting your buy structure. Yeah, Ashcroft wasn't going to play for you this week. If you're bringing in a guy who's going to be round 14 or 15, that's probably going to hurt your buy structure. So, yeah, it doesn't change anything, and you're already planning a week ahead for that premium, which will give you more flexibility for next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, I agree.
I'm getting, and I've had a couple, and that hopefully answers your question, Baz, because you were talking about Jimby to Darcy Cameron. So, yeah, in a perfect world, you want to think about that round 15. Jimmy's is asking, who do you think's the better? Well, I think you just would agree that Ford's a must-have. And would you consider now trading Mitchell, which everyone's thinking, or would you think of somebody like an Ashcroft? I know a few people are tossing about, do I try to hold Ashcroft through the buys, or do I move on him now?
If you don't move Ashcroft this week or next week, you're holding him until after that West Coast game in round 17, at least. But Seamus Mitchell he's pretty highly rated at Hawthorn, so I don't think illness is going to keep him out for more than just the 1 week, as long as that's all it is. But I mean, it really depends on what your buy's looking like for the next 3 weeks. If you don't have 18 players for next week or the week after or the week after that, then maybe you do trade Ashcroft or Seamus Mitchell. But I think I don't think you can go wrong trading either of them this week. It's just a matter of who you trade them to and what it does to your buy structure.
Yes. So for me, I've gone Seamus Mitchell to Wardlaw. As much as that doesn't probably help my round 15 situation, I was still able to find a way to cover that. But Mitchell's going to miss round 14 anyway, so it helps that round, and I'll have enough time to rectify the round 15 situation. If Mitchell was missing maybe next week, it would be a different story, and I probably would hold him. But the round 14's nearly as difficult as the round 15, so that's my view on it. But you're right, he's very highly rated, and he'll continue to get games. No different to Ashcroft, no different to Wardlaw. Like, these kids are the future of those clubs. Obviously, North Melbourne and Hawthorn are in a different situation to Brisbane, but we know how good Ashcroft is. So, as you said, Damo, if you're going to keep him, you're going to keep Ashcroft for at least another 2 or 3 weeks after his buy anyway. But if you're planning, if the move was that you're going to use his cash to need to upgrade, then you may as well just do it now.
Yeah.
Oh, Benny's jumped on and says, hello. Thanks for jumping on, mate. All right. We've got a non-super coach question. This is an interesting one from Ra. He goes, what do you think is going to happen to Clarko now? I don't know if you're up to date with all the latest allegations and that. And how do you think that maybe that coaching situation is going to go down at North Melbourne?
I mean, Brett Ratten's putting his best foot forward at the moment. They've looked a lot better these last two weeks. And I don't know if that's the caretaker coach thing or whether Brett Ratten has made some moves that make a bit more sense than what Clarko was doing. But yeah, I've got no idea. I've got to be very careful about what I say here. I mean, back in 2018 when Cyril just quit out of nowhere, no one really knew what was going on, but now it kind of makes sense. And it's not about who was right or wrong in that situation. He felt that he couldn't continue at the football club back in 2018, and now he and some other First Nations boys have decided to take some action against it. So we'll see how it plays out. I think that Chris Fagan will continue at Brisbane. I think that Alistair Clarkson will return in some form. Where I don't know if that will be to the coach's box, but he's got a contract at North Melbourne, and I think North Melbourne will be keen to keep him on in some capacity, even if he doesn't return to the coach's box entirely.
Yeah, exactly. And it'll just be a slight reset for them, but they know they're in a rebuild, so it doesn't matter if it's Clarko or Ratten and that. It's not changing things dramatically for them, where, say, a Richmond situation could, because whoever the coach is might have one view of going, yeah, we're still a chance here, or, no, we've got to reset and actually properly rebuild the list. But we all know where North Melbourne is. It's going to be trying to get the high talent and that. They're still in a chance to win the spoon and get Harley Reid. So, any coach that whoever takes over, and we know Ratten's a good development coach. So, but I think you're right there. I think Clarko will have some role, but if that's a head coach role or not, that'll be wait to see. Well done to Julie too. Thank you for answering. I always say this, guys. Feel free to answer each other's questions in the chat, and I know a few people didn't hear the news that Mitchell is out with an illness. So for those people catching up with that, that's the latest one. So you might want to quickly have a look at your teams if you are a Mitchell owner and see if you can cover him, or if you need to reverse some trades like I did earlier. For those who watch my team trade, I had Will Day traded out just because of that break even of 116, and he's been doing my head in. But he is now coming back in my side, and Mitchell's the one that is out.
Just on Will Day, his stats are ticking all the boxes. It's just his disposal efficiency.
Yep.
There's going to be a time where it all clicks and he starts to average 105 again. It's going to annoy everyone that traded him out. It's going to annoy everyone that still owns him, and going to annoy everyone that wanted to trade him in. But there's going to be one day. It might be after the bye. It might be this week. Who knows? But there's going to be one day where it all clicks for him again, and he's going to start pumping out those 105 scores, and it's going to be great for those who held the faith.
I'm hoping that sent a message to him, being traded out of my side all week. He gets the last minute reprieve. It seems to work like that sometimes, and that, even though these players have no idea about our Supercoach teams. But yeah, no, you're completely right.
And one other thing, you mentioned Richmond before. Obviously, this is away from Supercoach again, but what coach do you think will be the best fit for Richmond? And do you think Richmond needs to load up and go again, or do you think it's time to hit the reset button?
No, I think it's probably load up. It's because you're nearly all in. I know a few people have said, yeah, you look at the draft and that, but it's proven that the draft isn't the be-all and end-all. Like Carlton's the perfect example of that. Realistically, if you're drafting players, they shouldn't be taking the top-end money. It's usually, if you're keeping them on, it should be slightly less than that. And the guys that you bring in from other clubs are on better money. But all their top picks that they've drafted are now on nearly $1 million. And that's the other thing that, like, the Giants got themselves in trouble. If you have all these high first-round top 10 picks, they expect to be paid well. So completely resetting. And the hard thing for Richmond now is they don't actually have the picks to reset. It'd be different if they still had their first round pick this year, and you could go, okay, this year, next year, let's go. Even like we've seen Collingwood had that slight drop down the ladder, and even the Swans, and it can be successful. Like Melbourne's actually the perfect example when they got Jackson and Pickett. Like, you have that one bad year, pick up a couple good players, and then reset again. So I think there's nothing wrong with maybe it's a year just to get one or two little talent in there. But I don't think it needs to be a full reset. They seem to be very into Himmelberg. It still seems to be Sydney, Richmond, Essendon for his services. So it wouldn't surprise me if we run one out on that one. Just depending, I guess, what the coaching situation, like now that the coach has changed, maybe Himmelberg's had a change of mind, and maybe it is Sydney, which might be the easier call for him. But if they can get the right players at the right price to fit into our list, I definitely think maybe it's a coach that can take the next level. Maybe does somebody like Nathan Buckley want to leave the media role to go again, who's sort of been up there? So it'd be very interesting to sort of what coaches they're kind of sorting out. And there's going to be a couple on the market potentially with the Port Adelaide situation.
I can see you guys going for someone like Adam Uze. He's been very highly rated at every club that he's stepped into. Just missed out on the GWS role. Just missed out on a few others over the last few years. Sounds a little bit like Craig McRae in a sense, where he's been looked over right at the last hurdle. And Adam Uze, he's comes out of the Clarkson coaching school, or whatever you want to call it, and those coaches have been really very successful getting a team up to the top again quite quickly. So, and I think Brendan Gale said that a first-time coach is what you guys would look towards as well. So I think it'll be a case of whether Andrew McQualter gets the role full-time, or if you go for someone like Adam Uze or tap Dean Solomon on the shoulder or something like that.
Back onto Supercoach. I know, thank you to Benny Boy there, who's eating his pizza and having some whiskies and answering questions in the chat as well. Vice captains and captains this week, I know we've had a couple of questions about this, so I won't point out anyone in particular. But the first thing is, because of our blue dots, the players missing buys, you can literally go a GWS Richmond player into an Essendon North player if you really want to. You've got that much flexibility with captains and vice captains. But who are you liking, Damo?
I like Nick Dacos against West Coast. He plays a pretty similar role to Mason Redman, and Mason Redman scored 144 last week. So I think Nick Dacos could get around that mark again, but he's a vice captain, so it's a free hit essentially. I also quite like Bontempelli against Geelong. Just having a look at the fixture now. I like Connor Rosie against the Hawks. And if you've got one of them, and if you've got Max Gawn, I don't mind him against Tom DeConning tonight. I think that's another one to really consider as well. And Christian Petrarca is someone else to consider.
Yeah, I don't mind that Gawn call. There'll probably be Chris sitting there going, new beauty. He's probably all over it. He seems to get him right every week. I'm the same. I'm on Dacos. I think against West Coast, they're not giving up much opposition to him. And if they're going to tag, their two taggers play pure midfield. They won't go down to the back line. So he'll be too good for them on the wide open spaces as well. My captain at the moment is Zachy Merritt against North Melbourne. At Marvel, he'll just have a field day there if it comes to that. I didn't mind the idea of Taranto versus his old side GWS, but they probably are going to put some attention in him. He was so far best on ground last week, it wasn't funny. So I can't see the Giants letting him just do that against his old team at all, but that was tempting me. Because I think Taranto and Tom Green, it could be a situation where they just shake hands and rack off and get their 35 touches and do whatever they want. It's pretty well. Richmond put no defensive pressure into midfielders, so I wouldn't be surprised if Tommy Green has an absolute field day this week.
My captain at the moment is Jordan Dawson.
Well, the Suns have been giving up a lot of points to midfielders.
Everyone's going for Rory Laird out of the two Adelaide boys, and I know he said he was feeling ill in round one, but I think with the heat up in the Northern Territory, the way Jordan Dawson was able to adjust compared to how Rory Laird was able to adjust in round one, I just feel safer going with Jordan Dawson. And if you have a look at Jordan Dawson's season, there's only been a couple of weeks where he hasn't had a pretty good safety net of a captain's score.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I'm not as strong on the bottom one because I know Geelong are a bit weaker this year, but they just always seem to struggle against the Cats. It's one of those teams that they never perform about. And I 100% agree with you with Dawson. And maybe it's just because he's lived in Sydney, obviously New South Wales, a bit hotter than, well, you think South Australia would probably be warm too, but maybe just Dawson's used to those conditions more. And that leads just, some players just don't transition well when the weather's different. So, and it is brutally hot up there. If anybody's never been to the Northern Territory, especially Darwin, and that you literally get off the plane and you're sweating, and that I think last time I was up there it was about 4 a.m. in the morning, and it was that. So, yeah, it's a very interesting place just to visit, let alone play footy. So, yes, I think, and by the look at the group chat, I think a lot of love there for Merritt. He's that. A couple of people looking at maybe McRae. I'm not as big on McRae this week because Treloar's back. And even, what are your thoughts even about trading in McRae? Because I know I was saying on the pod, his average is 109 and he's had the two awesome 145s. But before sort of the Treloar injury, his average was 101, which is still good enough to be a sort of top 6, top 8 forward. However, are you willing to pay $570-ish for a guy that was technically averaging 100 with a full complement of midfielders? Or do you think, well, he's just a lock in there at the top sort of 6 and people should be looking at him?
He's becoming one of those players with a high floor, low ceiling when there's a full Western Bulldogs team to choose from. And in the forward line, that is gold. I think you pay what he's worth now because he's not getting any cheaper. And you just ride because he's going to be a top 4, top 6, top 8 forward if someone comes from the clouds. I absolutely think you'd jump on.
Yep, I don't mind it. I actually had him in, and I've swapped back down to Wardlaw. So I gather you've got McRae in.
I got him in, yeah.
It's still that's the decision that I'm sort of debating about. For me, do I want to leave that cash for Neil and Stewart the next 2 weeks? And it's more because I'm a big fan of Darcy Cameron, so I've already got the 5 forwards. So as much as McRae would be great in there, Darcy Cameron potentially gives me a lot more flexibility in case I miss English or Marshall get a week injury. So, and he's $100,000 cheaper, which I can do stuff with. But I definitely understand why everybody would want to jump on McRae, and that naturally, as you said, he's very good floor. And if there is an injury at the Bulldogs, he is just going to absolutely dominate like we've seen the last 2 weeks.
I also think the drafting of Caleb Poulter actually helps him. I think it'll mean they'll stop having to rotate him up to the forward line or onto the wing now, because Caleb Poulter plays that role for Footscray, and they've drafted him, and Bevo loves his Footscray VFL players. I've got a feeling we'll be seeing Poulter very, very soon. But in saying that, at 212k, we will not be trading him in when he is named.
Yeah, exactly. I think it had to be Briggs only because he's got the back-to-back hundreds, and Wardlaw just because of the role. Like the kid's a jet. If I was saying it last week, if the draft was just open and you're taking the best, like the Giants had who's the best guy on kind of performance leading up to last year, not thinking long-term where they needed a key forward, you're taking Ashcroft 1 and Wardlaw 2. And that's no disrespect to Sheasel because the kid's a jet as well, but Ashcroft and Wardlaw were by far the best pure midfielders in that draft. But it's just because of Wardlaw's injuries all second half of the year, we probably didn't get to see the best of him when it really mattered for the under-18s, which probably helped North Melbourne to sneak him when they did. So, yeah, he's going to be an awesome player for them. So, yeah, there's a part of me that thinks maybe I'll just change Wardlaw to McRae, but then it probably mucks up the premiums I want to bring in as well for around 12 and 13. So that's a little bit thought, and I know that's why a few people are on that thought, on that fence about McRae, because if you're looking at Neil next week, if you are thinking about Brayshaw or Sarong, they obviously will be done with their bye when McRae will still have his bye coming up. So in regards bringing up Poulter, any of the other the mid-season draft rookies that you think might get a game within the next, say, couple of weeks?
Matt Forrest at the Geelong Advertiser tells me that Mitch Hardy has been mentioned by Chris Scott in press conferences as someone who they want to integrate into the AFL program as quick as possible. So he is someone to keep an eye on. I think Harry Arnold comes into that Sydney team eventually. I don't know if it's over the next few weeks, but I think he's someone, if you need a 102k player to kind of shovel into your trades, he's someone who you can stash at D8 for the end of the season. And then you got Ryan Marrick at West Coast, who I think will come in pretty quickly, just like Jai Cully did, and play at least a handful of games.
Oh, 100%. I think, West Coast with marriage there. He's the only problem is being that 193k forward. It's not going to be as good for Supercoach scoring, but for 102k, a guy that they're going to probably play every week, and they kind of need that extra forward too. It's really been Oscar Allen carrying their entire load up there. So, I think give him 2 weeks to settle into WA, which he's never actually been to before. He literally landed there the first time on Thursday. And I wouldn't be surprised with their injuries. Maybe straight after their bye, he starts playing some footy for them.
And the jerseys behind me might catch fire, but credit to West Coast for their first year players going and meeting him at the airport. Shows maturity from their draft class to bring someone else into their fraternity and welcome him. So shout out to them. Oh God, that was awful. Yeah.
It's like me complimenting an Essendon, something Essendon does. I get it, mate.
Jesus. Sitting here in Perth, front row seats to what's happening at West Coast, and it feels like the last 3 or 4 weeks they've started to accept that they're not that powerhouse team at the moment anymore. So there's been some changes to the way they've approached the media. There've been some changes to the way they've approached team selection, to the way that they've promoted themselves. And I've got to commend them, because it's tough when that finally happens, but you know that once they've accepted it, there's going to be better days ahead.
Of course. And it's always the club, accepts it more than the fans. And I know, I watch some of these memes and that, and the fans are really struggling with it at the moment. But it happens. That's footy cycle and that. There's no, it's why Hawthorn and Richmond are now sitting down sort of lower. Geelong are going to have their big fall very soon. Like, we know it's finally going to come. And that's the way it works, and that no team under this system can just stay up there forever. But if it did, it would just be like the English Premier League system, which as a City supporter I love, but it does kind of get a little boring compared to AFL, where you've got the same, it's the same 3 or 4 teams competing every year, and if it wasn't for the relegation system, it would be so boring. Like the Scottish Premier League's a great example of that. Celtic and Rangers since 87, I think it is, just had a monopoly on that league. So each year, unless if you're outside of those two clubs supporting them, what are you going for the football for outside of the passion and stuff? So it does make it good as a fan. And the West Coast supporters, they've had some great times, but now move along, watch Fremantle's rise up the ladder, and you can sook about it in all in your forums, and you'll come good eventually again.
All right, back to Supercoach. What's the next question?
I was actually going to say another one. The James Trezis, I think it is, and that from Richmond. I know Sam Banks has been really close, but just because, again, he's been in Richmond's VFL program. So I wouldn't be surprised if once Richmond get out of complete contention, which there's still a pulse at the moment, but I feel like after the buys, you're going to probably see Steely Green himself and Sam Banks come in for some opportunities too. So it's not what was going to be a perfect situation, but if you've got some of these, if you need to go one up, one down, there will be. That's another potential 102k guy that you'll able to use to bring in a premium.
Yeah, Steely Green, one of the best names in the AFL.
Fantastic name, fantastic. That some good. Matty Dix, what's he saying? Worth not upgrading next week to wait for cash gen. Especially with Mitchell being a late out, or he's saying is it better to sort of save trades and start planning for your LDUs, your Mills, your Cripps, these sort of players that we're going to get value on. Where do you kind of stand about going the premiums like your Sarongs and Brayshaws, who are pretty well top price, versus maybe it's waiting 2 or 3 weeks to get some value?
It's all about balance and how your team's looking right now. If you have a team that kind of looks a bit holy it's going to take a while for you to complete it anyway, then why not wait for the cheaper options as they return? But if your team has only got 1 or 2 upgrades left and you can afford a Caleb Sarong or someone along those lines at their current price, then jump on, finish your team now, and enjoy the ride on the run home. Don't use trades trying to catch these cheaper options, because the way this season's been, those trades are going to be valuable heading into Supercoach finals.
Exactly, and that's my only worry about going, say, Mitchell to Wardlaw, which is only making me sort of 100k, maybe 110k. But if it was kind of a rookie that I knew might not have as good a job security, then I would have just saved the trade. But because it's a rookie who I know, I'm pretty well picking there as a safety net for my midfield, and that's where we've got to get. I was chatting to someone today, I think they were down to like 8 trades left, and if your team isn't complete or near complete, you're gonna be like Abdul last year and be praying for the last 6 to 8 weeks that you lose no players. We all love trading. But you've got to have a plan around that. And I know I was saying to our guys today, I think that puts the 3 today put me down to 11. But I know using the cash that I have, which was close to 700k, bringing Neil, Stewart, and then 1 other premium, I'm down to only needing 2 more mids, and I've still got Humphrey, Weddle, a couple other rookies, Briggs, who I'll able to cash out. and maybe 1 down, 2 up situation to get those last 2 midfielders if it's a value midfield. So, you still want to have something after the buys. I'd put in a perfect world would rather more than 4 or 5 trades, but you've still got to have something coming out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I won't show it on the live stream, but I've actually got a massive spreadsheet with my buy plan on it, and I've used more trades than I would like this year up to this point, but I've kind of had to. Otherwise, I would have had no team for some rounds, and it would have hurt me more than it already has. But I know after the buys, my team's going to be in a good position to now really make an assault on to go up the rankings. But yeah, it just hasn't panned out for me this season with all the carnage. It feels like last year I was stepping around landmines, and this year I'm stepping on them. So,
and that's what, like, I've said this, and I don't know how you sort of plan around it, because where are you ranked at the moment, Damo? If you don't mind me asking, mate.
Oh, This is going to be a long answer, because I have gone up the rankings 28,000 places in the last 3 weeks. So I have made great strides from where I was, but I ballooned out to 54K.
Yep.
And I've had to change my approach to the way I manage my team to help me move up the rankings. And considering I've moved up 28K in 3 weeks, I'm moving in the right direction. I just need to keep that trajectory going and continue to be aggressive. I don't like being aggressive, but I need to be able to fix where I'm at.
Yeah, and this is what I said a few weeks ago to people who are asking me this. I go, this is your great opportunity through the buys. If you are further back in rankings, and this is you, Ben, on the chat, but you've got the opportunity, because a lot of the top people are going to play it safe. They're, making sure, they've got pretty well the premiums that all the other top premiums own, because if you've got a kind of too many pods, there's potential you're going to lose ground from each other. And this is where, like last year, like I keep telling the story around the buys coming in around rank 13, 14,000. And I was throwing caution to the wind. I'll bring in Himmelberg, and then he comes out and gets 180 odd. I'll bring in another. I think I may have even jumped on Sinclair early, Darcy Cameron early, all these sort of really risky moves that paid off. And then all of a sudden, like, I'm jumping people massively because they're coming out and scoring really well. And other people are, they're just because of the safety of it. So you're never out of it, especially during the buy rounds. But you might have, the thing I said a couple of weeks ago was, does it really matter if you're 50,000 or 40,000 and you take a risk with a couple of players and you fall back to 60, 70,000? What difference does it make? You may as well throw, caution to the wind and have a crack. And if you do think you're too far back, well, then either try to set yourself up for your league wins, or maybe even try to concentrate on winning one of the bye rounds, and maybe, team of the week kind of situation. That there's always something that you can set your team up for. Because only one person, and that was JP, and the year before Emily, can win, the overall prize. Like, my goal still, I always want to finish top 1,000, and then whatever happens from there happens. But yeah, you still need a lot to go right. So yeah, I know some people get a bit disheartened sometimes because they have bad weeks, but yeah, that's just my advice for it.
This is the first year where I have been this far out of the top 10K at this point of the season. I've always finished inside the top 10K. In fact, before COVID, I had never finished outside the top 5K. But then COVID rolled around, and I started being like, well, the season's a bit of a Hail Mary anyway, so I may as well do whatever. And then I haven't really recovered because I've kind of liked how I've done certain moves over the last 3 years. So I wanted to do it again. And so I haven't really been, and it sounds like a cop-out, but I haven't really been playing all that seriously. And now it's getting back to the real, back to the real stuff with crowds and the venues not changing all the time, and players can now play with COVID as long as they isolate or like all these different things. So the game's back to how it was now, and those who, and now I'm needing to take it seriously again. And this year I wasn't really doing that at the beginning, but now I need to do it to sort of fix myself towards the end.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point from Ryan. Like, I don't know where you're ranked, Ryan, but he's gone aggressive and traded Shrek, as in Sean Darcy, to Briggs, to then use that cash to get Mitchell up to Stewart. I think that's what he was looking at. I'd hold Chincotta, mate, and go Mitchell up to Stewart, because, and if you're ranked further back, then why not? Like, you're bringing on another premium, so you've upgraded a rookie on field, and your rookie ruck has the ability to match any of the rucks over the next few weeks anyway, and hopefully makes enough cash where then you can sideways to maybe another ruck, or with some money on it, get a ruck that's dropped to 500,000 that could potentially see out your season. Something I did, I think it might have been 2 years ago, like I jumped on like a Goldie, for example, for the last 8 weeks, and he just went on an absolute heater. So guys that you're bringing in also at the moment, they don't necessarily have to be finish top 6 for the season. They've just got to go close enough to being top 6 for the next 8, 10, 14 weeks. And that's where I know a few people are like, well, looking, say, Redmond's draw, for example, and we're getting on him because they're like, well, yeah, he might have not had the best average to a certain point, but yeah, he can definitely match it with the other guys, or Bailey Dell for that price. That was my thoughts with Ollie Wines, setting himself for a second half of the year where he's definitely gone on runs of 115. And we've seen some, compared to some of the midfielders this year, that could be good enough to be top 10 for that period. So, yeah, especially if you're in that position, Ryan, I really like it. I think that's a really aggressive move. And something I think I did a couple of years ago when, was it Riley O'Brien? That was like 100k, 200k or something that came in, and I had him as my first ruck, where he was just tunning up each week. And then you just use that cash like you are for Stewart. So I think that's pretty good, mate.
Yeah, and even though Darcy's only going to miss 1 or 2 weeks, who knows what he's going to be like when he comes back, because the way Luke Jackson played against Melbourne last week, they might choose to have Jackson play a little bit more ruck time. And while that's great for Luke Jackson and people who want to jump on Luke Jackson, it might not be great for those who are holding on to Sean Darcy.
As a Fremantle supporter, do you actually think they should consider moving on Sean Darcy now that you've got Luke Jackson, if it meant getting a player that would fix one of your other positions? I know it's a question on the mate, but...
No, I think they hold on.
Yeah.
Only because how hard is it to build ruck depth at the... there are teams out there who, if their one good ruckman goes down, who are they bringing in?
No.
So no, I think you hold on to Sean Darcy. And hey, that might be, and if Freo hold on to him, or say they're holding on to him, there might be a team that comes along and says, hey, we'll give you all these picks and this player, and they go, actually, that actually helps us more than holding on to him. But I think I think hold on to him, or at least hold on to him long enough that teams come asking and offering a good amount in return.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you want them. Like, I think Geelong has the potential there. If they thought they could get another year or two out of the senior players that they have, do they move on one of their younger potential guns to get in a Darcy to help them challenge for the flag? Now, maybe if 2 or 3 years ago would have been the role for that, maybe they're slightly a little bit older. Or is it maybe the Bulldogs? I think they've re-signed English, but potentially could have there been a move there if English had wanted to go home, or even feels that way, that that both clubs could come to an agreement there. There are clubs where they could potentially do something, and we know that Darcy's probably going to be the most dominant rucks. I like the idea of keeping him because Jackson's got so much flexibility. From a Supercoach perspective, I would love to see Darcy move and then potentially start Darcy and Jackson as my rucks going forward. I've actually liked the fact that there hasn't really been the clear ruck this year, and everyone's got different strategies. Like, for so long, Cox and Sanderlands, and then Grundy and Gawn. It's just been dominant. Where this year it seems every week I'm either playing someone that might have English or Darcy, I've even come up against a couple of teams that have gone like really kind of weird mid-price sort of rucks and saved their cash and gone elsewhere. And I like the different strategies that have sort of been put forward this season.
Yeah, and everyone thinks it's going to be English and Darcy, but who knows if English is even going to stay at the Bulldogs after this year, because he's being referred to as a pre-agent, through all those articles. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of rucks bob up over the preseason as well, because there's mature ages that are being talked about. There's clubs looking for ruckman that's being talked about. Like if Tom De Koning does go somewhere and becomes the number one ruck at another club, is he someone that you'd start at R2 at 300k and then build up somewhere else in your side? Because Tom De Koning might only average 80 or 90, but if he starts at 300k or whatever it would be, he's going to make money, and then you can think about what to do with him at the buys. I know we're talking 12 months ahead now, but like, I don't think the ruck line is as cut and dry as it once was.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the sort of like things that people got away with last year, with the cheaper ruck coming in at 300k, especially those who set up, was it Bruce and Witts, as kind of even your R3 situation, and just got paid off massively. So it does able to put money elsewhere. For those asking about Stewart, I'm personally bringing him in after his bye. I know a lot of people already own him and that, but I just think, we got one more week and then he misses anyway. He's the perfect person round 14. I'm looking for someone to trade in. I don't want to be in a situation because I'm going to want to do a trade that week and I've got the money to do it. Who else am I bringing in from Gold Coast and Geelong? Like Noah Anderson's break even is going to be probably too big, and he's kind of not scoring well enough at the moment for me to really want to bring him in. And I think Matt Rowell's going to price himself out by the time I want to get him in there. And that's the hard thing. Has he already had his sort of big run? Can I trust him to keep pumping out the massive score, especially with Tuke Miller getting closer and closer to coming back? So the only person as a non-Stewart owner that I'm looking to trade in is him that week. So I'd hold off there and wait, because otherwise you're going to have no one to really trade in for outside maybe another round 12 guy. But in a perfect world, you want to focus on your round 12 guys this week or next week.
Yeah, absolutely. I need two players to complete my defence, and I think I'm going to go Jake Lloyd at the end of this round, and then Tom Stewart at the end of the next the end of next week, which is the Geelong bye round.
Exactly, and this is what you're talking about, having your big spreadsheet. And I do it more in like the group chats, and I have little notes everywhere. But yeah, it's sort of even jotting out sort of a quick, even if it's a quick 5-10 minute plan of going, this is what I'm thinking, and this is kind of the players I want to go in, and that's what I shared with our group before. I just said, this is the premiums each round that I've worked out. I don't know about the rookies, and that will sort of present themselves a bit like, was it Mullins there for Geelong? If he keeps his spot, he's on the watch list, but I know what premiums I'm targeting each round throughout the buys there, and I've got a pretty good idea of what cost they're going to be at. That's sort of how I plan it. So I know I was chatting to another train driver the other day down at Belgrave, and he had his little piece of paper, and it was the same. All he had was these premiums each round, and rookies will look after themselves.
Less than a minute until Melbourne v Carlton. What's your tip?
I'm on Melbourne. I can't trust Carlton at all.
I think I've tipped Melbourne by 22 points.
Yeah, I've gone the D's by 3 goals. I just it wouldn't surprise me at all if Carlton came out and put it all together, because Melbourne hasn't been in that great form. But the ruck combination of Grundy and Gawn is just going to be too dominant for what Carlton have gone. And Harry McKay, who's so out of form, imagine being that low of confidence and then you're lining up against Stephen May, one of the best centre-half backs in the competition. Like, he's in for a dirty night.
Absolutely.
Well, on that, we'll leave it there because we know we want to flick over the footy, and most people of our viewers would. Damo, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to chat Supercoach and footy with you, mate.
That's all right, Swiss. Thanks for having me. It was great to chat, and I know we kind of went away from Supercoach a little bit there, but good discussions all around.
Yeah, exactly. And one quick one to our viewers. Firstly, thank you to Julie, because I see you've been answering a lot of questions. You and Ben and Lincoln have been having a great chat in there. I've put up on Twitter, if anyone's not doing anything on Sunday, myself and the Centre Bounce boys, we're getting together at the King's Hotel to watch the GWS Richmond game, and then we're going to float over to Essendon, North Melbourne after that. So feel free if you want to come down for a drink or a hamburger or whatever and say hi. I really appreciate that. Kev, I saw your message about Ferg. He messaged me yesterday as well, mate, to say, that you'd caught up and that. So awesome, mate. No, thank you for everybody that's sending questions. As always, continue to find us. How do the people find you? What are you there on Twitter there, Damo?
At Damo SC on Twitter, and then you can go to jockreynolds.com.au to look at all of the content that we produce.
Absolutely. And the Jock Reynolds boys have been doing a great job for a number of years. So thank you for all your work there, mate, and appreciate it. And we will all talk soon. Thank you.